My name is James Monroe Stevens, and I am 83 and a half years old.
Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born 8th of September 1940 in Round Lake, Florida, which is just north of Panama City, about 40 miles.
Okay. Did you grow up there?
I did until I was mid-teenager.
Okay. What was your childhood like there?
It was good. We had a good childhood. There was, counting myself, there was 12 children in our family. That's a big family. And so at Round Lake, there was plenty for youngsters to do. It was a small place. There were only 3 little stores there. 2 of them had gas pumps with them, and 1 didn't. And so, those little stores were close enough that we could walk or run, and had plenty of snacks. If we got a nickel or a dime, we could. But my brothers and sisters at that time, when you have that many children in one house at one lick, it gets a little chaotic sometimes. But my childhood, growing up, I went to grade school there, grade 1 through 6. And then I left there and went to Cottondale High School, which carried grades 7 through 12.
Okay. Was your elementary school, was that a small school, or what was that like?
Yeah, it was a small school, 2 classrooms and 1 all-purpose room. Wintertime wasn't good because I had to walk to school sometime. I didn't have shoes. So that was how unfortunate we were. I guess you would call it how poor we were. Didn't have any shoes, but I was tough enough, and my feet I went barefooted all the time anyway, and they were tough enough I could run in the sand in the wintertime and not pay much attention. But in the schoolhouse, we had those 2 classrooms we had. It was kind of set up where there was maybe 2 classes in one room at a time, and maybe another class or 2 in the all-purpose room. And so we had a wood stove in there. There was no air conditioning in the school, but we did have a window fan in each room, I think. But as students, we were required to bring in firewood, kind of help the teacher and the principal get a fire started. Mm-hmm. We didn't light the fire because we would have been a little dangerous with that. But we did have put wood in the fire. The older kids, for the most part, would put wood in the fire, and then a couple times a week take out the ashes. And so the old schoolhouse is still standing there today.
Oh, really?
The property was sold to an individual there at Round Lake, and they turned it into a home. Mm-hmm. And just 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I can't remember when that Category 5 hurricane came through, it blew all the roof off of it. Mm-hmm. So the last time I was there, which was a few months ago, it was still standing with blue tarp over the roof. So I'm not sure, I didn't see any activity, not sure anybody's living there now, but that was what my school was like there for 1 through 6th grade.
Having 11 siblings, what was that like?
Well, it was like once in a while we'd get in a fight, and Mom and Daddy would separate us and maybe knock somebody around and tell them to get out of the way. Don't do that no more. And of course, we had chores around the house. Some of us older. I was the 3rd oldest in the family among our siblings. And so we had different assign chores to do around the house. We chop wood, split wood, you know, when we're old enough, and brought it into the house, to the fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother also had a wood stove that she cooked on in the kitchen, and we brought wood in. We chopped separate wood, smaller wood for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought it in, and we did, you know, we got into all the troubles that normal kids get into. You know, I don't want to say I got in a fight with somebody and whipped his butt, but I did. And he wasn't really a good friend of mine, but I don't know if he's still at Round Lake or somewhere else now. But I know that one of my good friends, old Ronnie Swells, is still living close to the old home place we hid there. And he's near my age. And his daddy gave some of us younger kids that needed some chores to do, some work to do. You know, we helped him with farming when we were barely big enough to, you know, to do much.
Mm-hmm.
But he took Ronnie and I to Mariana every weekend on Saturday for a movie show. Gave us enough money to get a coat and get in the show, which was 35 cents.
So is that something you look forward to?
Oh, yeah. I look forward to that every Saturday. But for the most part, my siblings were the friendly type. Mom and Daddy taught us to, you know, take pride in ownership and do right things. And so 7 of my siblings have already passed on. And we have 5 that are living today.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sister, Shirley, our oldest sister, is in California. She married a man that moved to California, just south of Los Angeles. She still lives there. She's the oldest sister. And then I have a brother that's a year and a half or so younger than me, and he lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and owns a meat market that he's been running there for 40-something years.
Oh.
And he's a very good brother. If you need something, you know, all you have to do is let him know. And so that's always nice to have. But when Diane and I would stop there for some reason, and, you know, with the meat market there, we usually brought home something good. So we were glad to stop and visit with him and, you know, pick up a few items that we could use. And so that was always fun. Then I have a brother, the youngest brother lives in Alford, Florida. That's about 3 miles from where we were born in Round Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a younger sister, Glenda Faye, lives almost in Round Lake where we were born and raised. And so that's the 5 of us that are still surviving. And of course, my mother and daddy have passed on.
Okay. What about your parents? What did they do?
Well, I will start out by saying my mama was, what do they call it when you take care of the home? Anyway, she took care of the home mostly, but as the kids got older and started leaving home, she started working a job with the Salvation Army. And she worked that job for many years. And, you know, it was a good thing for her because we didn't have much, and she could get clothes for the children, younger children.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a good thing, but she was a great mother. She took care of us. You know, I'll tell you a little story about some of my siblings that there was a lake called Round Lake. The reason it was named Round Lake, we lived close to a lake there.
Mm-hmm.
So she took us swimming at the lake quite often. You know, we just jump in our swimsuits and we take off, and we leave her about a quarter mile behind, and she would catch up with us, and you know, we'd go swimming and we'd go back home. But anyway, when they moved, I was already gone at this time. When they moved from Round Lake, It was about 2 or 3 miles where they lived at that time after I went in the Army. And my younger kids, Johnny and Glenda, and maybe one other, they were being naughty around the house. And Mama got after them and they ran under the house. We had a raised house, raised crawl space. So they ran out of the house to get away from her. And so she went back in the house and took her time and didn't say much, And after a while, she came out and said, "Y'all want to go swimming?" And said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Well, get your bathing suits on and get in the van." She had an old Volkswagen van. And so they got their bathing suits on, and all of them jumped in the van, and she came out there with a belt, and she drug them out one at a time and give them a licking.
She tricked them, huh?
She tricked them, yeah. But anyway, my daddy was, the first thing I ever knew him doing was doing some pulpwooding, where you go out in you know what that is, go out in the forest and cut pine trees. They called it pulpwooding.
Okay.
And they cut them in 8 feet length and loaded them by hand onto a truck. And that's what he was doing. Is the first time I could remember. But we also had a neighbor there that was named Uncle Johnny Pauls, and he had 2 big oxen, and he was a logger that drug logs out of the woods with oxen. And my daddy worked with him some, but that was one of my best experiences, was to see how Uncle Johnny, we called him, worked those oxen dragging big logs. I'm talking about something you don't reach around,
Yeah.
out of the woods and dragging them to a station where they could be loaded and, taken to the mill. But after that, my daddy got into farming. He had an old Ford tractor that he used for farming some there in Round Lake. He farmed some land. It's not like today where you got to lease land for a high price. He farmed some land that he didn't, he just gave a quarter of what he made to the owner of the land, or something close to that. And so he did farming there. And then when I got a little bit older, he was doing, planting mostly truck farming crops, where he would load it on a truck, pick it, plant it, pick it, load it on a truck and take it to market in Panama City, which was from where we were at there was almost 40 miles. But anyway, I helped him some with that. And I forgot to tell you, I quit grade in the 8th grade after I was in Cottondale High School. And I helped Daddy some there with farming. And then a gentleman in Youngstown, Florida, which is about halfway between Round Lake and Panama City, or about 20 miles from Panama City, offered him a partnership to come and farm his land, and they would farm it on halves. He owned about 250 acres. And so he had an old Ford tractor, and my daddy had 2 mules. They were named Pete and Jake. Now, I loved old Pete because he was a Mustang, and he knew how to cut up. And you didn't dare get behind him because he might kick you, but he was strong. I mean, you put him behind the plow, and he could go. And Jake was an old nag that was kind of lazy. Didn't want nobody bothering him much, but once he got on the plow and you got him hooked up, he was tame. I mean, you could walk around the back of him and do whatever you wanted. Then when you got him hooked up to a plow and you told him get up, or clucked. I can't cluck now like I used to, but if you cluck, that meant walk, And so he he would do that. And so with those 2 mules and that old Ford tractor, we farmed that land. Like I said, I had quit school then, and I did go to school in Youngstown for a little while in the 9th grade, but I never graduated there. I thought I had all the education I was ever going to need, so I moved on and kept helping my daddy.
Yeah. So did y'all move when he did that, or?
Yes, we moved from Round Lake to Youngstown.
Okay.
And so the gentleman that took us in for that had a tenant house there that we moved into.
Okay.
At no cost.
Okay.
So that was part of the deal. We would live in the tenant house, help on the farm, and give him half, and then we'd go from there.
Okay.
Well, close by there was Bear Creek. Good fishing there. Ooh, big old dark holes that we could catch brim, catfish, shell cracker, just about anything. And so when we wasn't working, we was usually down by the creek with a pole, cane pole.
Fishing, huh?
Fishing. And so, but anyway, the farming there was good, and I'm probably talking too long because now that I've got my mind on childhood, it's going crazy.
Yeah. Well, what did y'all farm?
We farmed cotton, corn, sweet potatoes. I think one year we even grew some peanuts, but that didn't go good, so we didn't plant any more of those. But I remember one year we planted 12 acres of sweet potatoes. Now, I don't know if you know how sweet potatoes was planted back in the 50s, but you got sweet potato draws. They just, they were planted in little old things about the size of the tabletop there, and with a lip on them. And then once they grew up, you pulled that plant out, saved all the roots you could, and then you went, and you didn't have to have much because they was going to sprout out and come up again, but you went and laid those in rows about 12 inches apart. And then you took a stick and you poked the roots down into the dirt, and from there you had to water them. So we planted 12 acres with the help of myself, my 2 older brothers, and a younger brother. We planted 12 acres of sweet potatoes, and of course everything back then was manual work. And my daddy told myself and my older brother Robert, a year and a half older than me, he said, y'all take the mules and the wagon and go down to the creek and get us 2 55-gallon barrels of water and get on back here because we got things to do here. So we took off and we went down the hill to the creek, which was washed out. And like some of this heavy rain we just had, it washed out ruts. And, they wasn't, nobody going to fill in the ruts, and they hadn't been graded in a long, long, long time. But anyway, we got to the creek, and we took, I guess it was a 2.5-gallon bucket, and we dipped up, one standing up top and one in the creek, and we dipped up water and handed it up, poured it in the barrels, and filled up 2 55-gallon barrels. And of course, my brother, being the older, Brother Robert, he was driving the mules. He wouldn't let me have the reins, of course. And so we took off from the creek, and we was on a little bit of level ground for a while, and then we went running a bunch of those rain ruts. And the mules started struggling, and they just stopped. And Robert hit old Pete across the back with a rope, and they jerked and threw them 2 barrels of water out the back.
Did you have to do it all over?
So we had to go back and refill the barrels. And then Robert made me stand back in the wagon then and try to hold the barrels in case they started slipping, but he was able to ease them up next time. But when we got to the 12 acres where we had planted, my daddy chewed us out because we were so late. He knew how long it took to go and get 2 barrels of water. He wasn't happy when we showed up. Where have y'all been? Why so long? Well, we didn't want to tell him. We just made an excuse. I knew he'd whip Robert if he found out that he hit the mule. So we didn't say anything. We just told him, well, it took a while for us to do that. And he probably thought, we was down there sitting in the creek where, with our feet in it, having a good time. But anyway, when we got up there, what you had to do was, you had to take a bucket and go along those rows with a dipper, a good dipper that hold about half as much of this cup here. And you had to take that out, and where the hole was punched was the sweet potato draws. You walked along and poured a dipper of water in each one.
Yeah.
Because that was to get them started. You had to get them up and running, otherwise they would just lay down in the sun and maybe die there. So we had, I think, even one or two of the older girls help us carry buckets, but we had at least 6 rows at a time that we were going down and putting water on. That took quite a while. But those were fun times. We did that for, I think we started that around 1950, late 54, 55. And we stayed there with Mr. Browning, I think, through two crops. And then my daddy decided he would find another job, and he got a job in Panama City at a steel mill, I guess you would call it. It was by the water there. It took care of ships, breaking down ships and taking the electrical wire out of them when they were, finished. They were cut up into pieces, sold as scrap metal, a lot of times overseas to different countries. And so he decided he would take a job there and moved on to Panama City. But before they did that, I moved to Panama City and got me a job. But you asked about my childhood there, so I'm going to stop right there.
Okay. Well, no, you can keep going with what you did, what you were doing in Panama City.
But anyway, we had been hauling, my dad and I had been hauling watermelons to what we call the quarters, and we would sell them and make certain stops, and people would come to our truck and buy watermelons off the tailgate. And most of the time we sold watermelons for $0.25 a piece, but sometime if we had big melons, we'd sell them for half $1. And so I helped him with that for a while, and then when I took a job in Panama City at Kelly's Supermarket, I was only 15 years old. And so Mr. Kelly, who owned the market, I guess he got to liking me because he saw how hard I worked whenever we hauled watermelons to his place and unloaded them, or turnip greens, collard greens, mustard greens, and other things. When we stopped there to unload, I was in a hurry. And so I think he liked that. And so he asked my daddy if he could hire me. And my daddy apparently told him I wasn't but 15. And he said, I don't care, I'll take care of it. So he got me a room in a boarding house that was in walking distance of Kelly's Supermarket in St. Andrews, Panama City, Florida. So I was 15 whenever I went to work in Kelly's Supermarket in Panama City. And at first I was a helper in the produce market, where we took in produce from every kind and put it in a cooling shelf along the wall, probably 30 feet, 40 feet long. And then again, we had some of those things there. We had a few watermelons we kept in the cooler. We didn't put them up there, but we put bunches of turnip greens, collard greens, mustard greens. We put oranges, apples, pineapples, all kinds of fruits, you name it. Any kind of fruit that we could find, we put in that. And then, of course, we had other things, like potatoes and the normal produce stuff. And so my job was to help the produce manager get that all cleaned up. It had to be washed and scrubbed and whatever you do to produce, to put it in a case clean. And so my job was to help him do that. I would take stuff out back or get it out back out of the cooler or something and wash it, put it on a cart buggy and push it up to where we had the produce in the market there, and put it on the shelf. Display. He showed me how he wanted it displayed. Mm-hmm. So I had to display everything that I brought in there. And then after I worked there, I started at 15, and sometime after I was 16 years old, I was working with an older gentleman, and he decided he needed to retire. His health wasn't good, and he just decided. I remember his last name now, and a lot of names I don't remember, but his name was Mr. Halstead. Don't ask me his first name because I don't know what it is. But anyway, so he helped me get up and running to know how to handle all the stuff. Within 6 months, he had me trained. And I worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week for $15 a week. That was my starting salary. Mm-hmm. And at the time he retired, I got a raise. I think it was to around $20.
Was that good money back then, or?
Well, it was low.
Oh.
Less than average, let me put it that way. But anyway, so there was nobody else that knew what I knew about produce and how to clean it, display it, and help customers when they came in and had questions. He taught me that too, because most of the time after we had everything up, I may even been doing some other jobs in the meat market or in the grocery area. I could have been doing some of that, but my primary job was in the produce. So when he retired, I was more or less made the produce manager. And by that time I was about 16. And so yeah, I thought I was pretty cool then, I had a good job, making enough that I had enough money to, on Saturdays after I got off work, I would go across the street to the oyster bar and buy me 2 dozen oysters. And I think back then they was either a quarter or half a dollar a dozen. So I'd eat about 2 dozen. And the man that was right across the street was also good friends with Mr. Kelly, and he would give me a discount on that, so it didn't cost me much. If there was nobody in there, he might give them to me free.
Oh.
Because, if he needed some help or something, taking stuff across the street from the market, I was always there. So anyway, and I don't remember his name. But anyway, that was pretty good times. And of course, my father kept keeping tabs on me and making sure. Most of the time he would drop me off at the market, because after they moved to Panama City, sometime probably before I turned 16, he would drop me off there if he, I moved out of the boarding house and moved in with them. They moved down, and I can't remember when it was. It was sometime, I guess, in 16, early 17 years old. Mm-hmm. And so he would drop me off and then go to his job and so on. But one day he wasn't going, and he let me have his truck because I had a license, and at that time I was driving a 2.5-ton truck for Mr. Kelly and going to Birmingham and other places to pick up 300 or 400 watermelons and having them loaded and bring them back to the market, and having them unload them there. Or most of the time I had somebody that would help me, because 300 or 400 watermelons ain't easy to get off a truck. You had to have somebody to hand them down to you start with, because this truck bed was up this high.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was doing that when I was 16. And I remember that I pulled out of Birmingham one time with a load of watermelons on that 2.5-ton truck, boxed in truck, And I got on that long hill going out of Birmingham. And at that time, it was 231 highway. There wasn't an interstate there. And the hill on that 231 was tough. You had to really, uh, be careful getting up it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on that thing with that truck, and I missed a gear, and it come to almost a dead stop. And I finally got the lowest gear in it. And when I let out on the clutch, gave it some gas, the front end of it come off the ground a little bit. And it took me a while to get it leveled out. It bumped along, But I got up the hill with it and got on back to the market. But I remember that to this day. It scared me. It scared the life out of me. I was afraid it was going to roll back down that hill,
Oh, yeah.
or I was going to be stopped there and have to call a wrecker. And I knew Mr. Kelly wasn't going to be happy about that. So anyway, that little experience sticks with me to this day. And that was scary. But anyway, back to the story about my daddy let me have his truck to go to work. I took it that day and started out, and it was in the summertime when school was out. And I took off to Kelly's Market, and I thought I'd take a little shortcut, so I went through the neighborhood and I went by the grade school there. And there was some kids up on a top of a brick wall there. On beyond it, they were playing basketball. And I came around the curve too sharp, and I had leather seats in that truck, and it slid me over to the right. I lost control of it. It ran in right into the brick wall, a block wall. Knocked about 6 or 8 blocks out, Didn't damage the truck that much. It had a steel bumper on it that was pretty tough, but it was hung up on that thing. So I gets out and looks around, and I was like, whoo, I'm in big trouble now. So I looked over where the kids was playing basketball, and I said, hey, y'all come over and help me push this truck off the wall. So they reluctantly came over, and helped me get it off the wall, and I got in and started up, going off to the market. Well, I decided as I was going down there, it wasn't driving quite right. I thought, I better take this thing over to I knew some people that was right on the corner there that had a garage and a filling station. And so I took it over there, and I stopped, and I went in, and I told the man, I knew him because I'd bought gas there and been in the filling station, and I said, I ran my dad's truck into a wall, and I think I got a little problem in the front end. I wonder if y'all check it out. And so they had come out looking for it when a policeman pulled up. He says, hey, come over here. Get in my car. So I got in his car, and I ain't going to tell you what happened after that. But it wasn't good. But Mr. Kelly bailed me out. Let me just say that. Mr. Kelly bailed me out. So anyway, that was the experience I won't forget either. But that's the kind of stuff that happens to you when you're a teenager, So from there, I left Kelly's Market, and went about my life.
Yeah.
Okay, I decided I would, I had worked at Kelly's Supermarket a while, and my brother Robert, who was 1.5 years, 2 years older than me, convinced me that I could make a little more money if I would come and go with him deep sea fishing or commercial fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. And he was fishing at that time on a boat. And this time I'd already turned 17 years old. And he convinced me that it was a share type boat where you got a share of what was caught. For example, if you caught a big catch, you would get maybe $50, $75, $100. If you didn't, you got something less than that. But you stayed out on the water 7 days. Well, anyway, so I joined up with him, and I kind of like that. I love fishing anyway. I've been fishing Bear Creek, and I've been fishing, around Panama City in the bays and that kind of stuff. And I think at that time I had even been out on a party boat, red snapper fishing. So, I like that. But anyway, So he got me lined up for that, and we had probably, I think it was either 6 or 7 fishermen on the boat. And we had one cook. Of course, we had a captain, we had an assistant captain. That was my brother, Robert. He was kind of the straw boss out on the deck when we was fishing, because the captain was busy with the wheel house inside. And so we loaded up the boat called the C.S. Anderson, and we had to load ice, crushed ice, and we had 3 or 4 big boxes for crushed ice in it where we would alternate and put fish in when we were out on, to make sure they stayed super cold. So we would do that, have groceries and water and colas and food. And we would head out into the Gulf of Mexico. And I learned a lot about commercial fishing. It was a little bit different than pleasure fishing on a party boat, because we had some things on there that gave you a little help as far as pulling fish up. And we call it a one-arm bandit. It was a wheel that had a cable on it that when you had a bite that you just wind it and pull them up. And we would have sometime 3 to 5 hooks on there, depending on what kind of area we were fishing in. If we were in a bunch of snappers, we would have maybe 3 hooks. No, I'm sorry, 5 hooks. If we were in grouper, we would have 3 hooks because they're much bigger fish and they're tough to get up, So we would use this one-arm bandit to wind them in. And so I think we had 3 of those on each side of the boat. And we had one guy that when we really had fish coming in, his job was to what we call draw them, which means cut them open on the side and pull out the guts, entrails, and chunk out it back overboard for the fish to eat, because they love that. The turtle, there's everything in the seas. Turtles, you name it. Shark, there ain't no telling. But anyway, so we got all that going, and I learned, I was seasick. The water was a little rough when I was seasick the first day after we got out on the ocean. And so I curled up down below deck where we slept, and I stayed down there for a couple of hours, and everybody else was up on the deck fishing. They were seasoned fishermen, and I was what they call a greenhorn. And so I was laying down on the deck there, moaning and groaning, and my brother Robert came down there, and he said, "Listen, boy," he said, "you get up and get on the deck out there. I'm going to get you some 7-Up and some soda crackers. And you get up and you go to fishing. We're going to be out here 7 days. You don't want to be sick 7 days. So you get up and you stay on the deck. Get this out of your system, and you'll be all right. If you drink 7-Up and eat soda crackers and you vomit over the side, we don't care. Just feed the fish. But you got to wind the one-armed bandit." So I decided, that was right. I didn't want to be sick 7 days. And so I got up and did what he said. And, I stayed on the deck, the rest of the day until I was sure glad when it was over that first day, though, so I could lay down again because my stomach was still a little bit queasy. But the following day, it got better and better, and then it didn't bother me. I didn't need anything. I could drink Dr. Pepper or whatever else come along,
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 17 when I started that job.
Okay.
And so there was a couple of things that caused me to quit commercial fishing and find me a job on dry land. And one of those was every night we had to have somebody sitting in the wheelhouse we had lights on the boat, which was required by law. But we had somebody in the wheelhouse while other people slept, because you had to know what the surroundings were. There wasn't any such thing as everybody on the boat going to sleep at the same time.
Mm.
So we anchored one night. I don't know, we was probably in 150, 200 feet of water. And we did what was required. I think it was either two shifts, I think, in the wheelhouse. You know, somebody had to stay awake about 4 hours and another one stay awake 4 hours. Well, the guy in the wheelhouse that night that we anchored went to sleep. And so a oil tanker that was probably nearly 500 to 700 feet long, and it was foggy, and we heard his foghorn out to the front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we were almost directly in his path. And so I think the captain heard the foghorn first, or maybe my brother Robert, and they jumped up and scrambled everybody and said, get up and get on the deck, quick. And the captain told my brother Robert, said, take a bait knife and cut that rope, cut that anchor, and tie a vest on it so it'll float. And so my brother went to the front of the boat, cut the rope, tied a life vest on it or a float, throwed it over, and the captain had the boat started already, and he turned it dead right from the oil tanker. And he came by us probably within, I'd say, 50 to 75 feet. And we were going away from him as fast as we could, but the waves caught up with us and almost capsized us. And so that was one thing that gave me reason to want to find a job on dry land. The next reason was we got caught in a storm out there one time. It was pretty bad. I mean, the weather was terrible. Wind 25 miles an hour, waves 6 to 8 feet. Mm. And the captain decided to stay out there too long rather than trying to get back to shore, because we were catching good fish. And that was a mistake, but finally he realized that we had to get in somewhere, otherwise we were going to be possibly, you know, if it got any worse, we were going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. So he started moving towards shore. I had my brother Robert. It was raining so hard, he had him in the wheelhouse door blowing a foghorn. Woo! That thing was, whew, Lord, it'd break your ears when he blew it, you know. But we couldn't see much, and it was something to try to keep you safe while you were trying to get to shore. Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of Cape Sandblast, right down south of Panama City, Florida. But we got to shore, and we pulled in behind a kind of a cove. We were still in the ocean edge, but we were in a cove that was deep enough for our boat to get in. And we stayed there until the storm was over, and it's safe to travel. And the captain decided that we would go on to shore, unload, and then come back out. That was another thing that caused me to think about whether or not I wanted to spend my life on the high seas. You know, so anyway, I told my brother Robert, I don't know, I'd probably made I don't know how many trips, but quite a few. And I told him, I think I'm going to find me a job on shore here. And so I was probably 6 months from 18 years old. And then, you know, the Army would take you if you were 17, if you had a high school education, but they wouldn't take you if you didn't have a high school education at 17. You had to be 18. So, and I don't know what that was about. I guess it was because they had plenty of recruits. But so I got me some odd jobs there on shore in Panama City. I tried roofing houses. I didn't like that job very much. That's in the heat in Panama City, roofing houses, doing roofing work is not good. I tried that for a couple months, and I decided I'd lay out of work with that. And then my daddy was running a fruit and vegetable stand, a curbside market in Panama City. He had got to the point that he thought that he'd had enough of the steel mill operation, and he was nearing retirement too. You know, he was getting a little bit old. He had back trouble. He had back surgery, and so he decided to open up a curb market there, and we opened up a curb market on I think it was on Highway 90, just going out to Tunnel Air Force Base, and they lived close by. And so I helped him at the curb market some, you know, setting up vegetables, you know, throwing out the rotted ones and different kind of stuff, you know. And my mother said to me one day, she said, "James, what are you doing? Why don't you," I was 18, then I turned 18. She said, "Why don't you join the Army?" Well, I said, "Well, Mama, I hadn't thought much about it." I said, so I think she called a recruiting station. I'm not sure how this transpired, but she took me down to the recruiting station, and the guy told me, "If you want to volunteer for the draft, I can get you in the Army quick. If you wait to join, you know, under other circumstances, you probably won't get in for a while. Mm-hmm. But if you volunteer for the draft, I can have you in there quick." Well, Mama says, "What do you got to do?" And he says, "We got to sign some papers, and you got to sign some too." And so we signed all them papers, and about 2 or 3 days later, I was on a bus headed to Montgomery, Alabama, to the induction station, and then a day or so later into Fort Jackson for basic training.
Now, what year was this?
1959, in March 1959.
Okay.
The date was the 19th of March, 1959, when I joined the Army.